Alright, drugs. They can be good, they can be bad. We mostly know two types that exist right now, which are just the pharmaceutical and also the street drugs. So this includes anything that can be super beneficial all the way to something that can be mind-blowingly addicted and life-ruining. Uh, Drugs are usually, they're vices to men. Like, it takes the edge off of your day. So you come home from a long day at work, you don't usually turn to drugs like pharmaceutical or street. Some people do, but like you play a video game, that's what takes the edge off your day. You blow off some steam. Positions are deeply divided on whether or not illegal drug use should be a crime. On drug use here, I'm going to introduce a couple issues, including the drug war, taxpayer costs to imprison these guys, and freedom of choice. Alright, in some communities, drug use disgusts others. It disgusts the community to see people like shooting up in their backyards, or it's just seen as like kind of one of those inherently bad things to people. But to others, it's their release. It's how they cope with the day. According to the Vera Institute for Justice, in 2013, the average cost to jail someone was $31,000 a year. That's a complete waste of taxpayers, and it feels like they have been betrayed. And it's too much for just their own personal choice to be locked up by these people. If we lock up violent criminals, that kind of leaves less room for nonviolent drug offenders. So would you feel much safer knowing that a marijuana user is out on the street who doesn't hurt anybody and who just likes to eat a lot versus a rapist? Does that make people feel comfortable? The drug war is perpetual, speaking, because no one really wants it to end. Police like it because they get funding to do what they do, and then politicians get paid to pass legislation that bans drugs, on top of bankers who facilitate the transaction between these drugs. So it would never stop if people really like this funding for it. For example, an 80-year-old was arrested the other day, I think. It might have been a couple weeks ago. But an 80-year-old was arrested for possessing one marijuana plant to ease her arthritis and her glaucoma. Now, the police swooped in with a military-style helicopter, according to most news outlets, only to take this one plant. According to American philosopher Wayne Dyer, freedom means to live how you choose. Anything else is slavery. The Constitution guarantees the right to choose between drugs if you want to use them or not. That's kind of what the principle that America was founded on, freedom of choice. So it's not just pharmaceuticals that the FDA has approved. This also includes street drugs. I mean, alcohol was illegal since it was made illegal during the Great Depression to curb violence and to stop people from spending all their money. But because of such mainstream use, it was declared legal again because it led to so many deaths and it was so pointless to some. So people suffer from this war that goes on and on. It seems inevitable, but it can stop if drugs are legalized. So to some, it would be great if it was, or it would be great if it wasn't to politicians and bankers. I hope I have properly informed you about drugs and the personal choices of this.
Questions? Yep.
Questions.
Yeah, so you said that it costs so much to place people in prison, but couldn't you put them on house arrest instead? Is that something they're looking at?
You could put them on house arrest, but why would they put them on house arrest if the police enjoy getting these taxpayer fundings, like, for the sentencing? Because if they're put in a prison, then house arrest doesn't seem like a good option to cut back on money.
You said disgust people, and sometimes it's just how people cope. But if they're shooting up, then that can spread disease. And in Carnesville, the rates are really high into that, and it's not clean.
Most of them are using shared needles that are laden with diseases, but if you're doing it smartly with sanitized needles that have never touched anyone but your own, then you can't spread diseases if nobody reuses that.
You said that you compared how people take off the edge using pharmaceutical or street drugs to how you personally take off your edge by going home and playing video games. So what's to say if the legalizes that, how can we then, because someone could come up and be like, well, you know, I take my edge off by, you know, shooting somebody or, you know, like harming animals or something like that. How would the government, like, how would they conform to like a set standard? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, since the use of alcohol and caffeine is also a drug, although it's very less mild than all of these, but it would be regulated definitely, like how you have to be 21 to buy alcohol. So there would probably, like, there's one point where you come to where it's like, all right, this is too much to legalize. I don't think personally that drug use can be out of that range because people already use so many pharmaceuticals, like just naturally. So the only difference is that one's legal and one's not.
How would that then affect our youth? Because like you say, like, sorry, I'm not meaning to like, you know, like attack you, I just have
Sorry.
questions. Like the alcohol age, you know, you have to be 21, but you know, we're all in high school, we know that that's not really
Followed.
something that's like followed. So then how would that affect our youth? Because like, say street drugs, that can like really like harm, you know, a youth's development.
Well, that would be prevented the same way alcohol is or isn't prevented right now. Because you see how there are ways to get around some laws. Like, we've already made drugs illegal, yet there are black markets that spring up to sell these drugs specifically. So I don't think there's any way around it, although, I mean, there are things in place to curb it. Anyone else?
So I know the war on drugs has been going on for decades now.
Since the 70s about.
Yes. So how did that affect you, like picking your information with such a vast amount of information?
Well, because it's been going on for decades, there's been hardcore research done in study groups that have not been funded by the government to find out the true effects of what the drug war has had on people. And most of the conclusions is that it's ruining families and lives.
So, like, doing heroin's illegal and everything, but they have these clinics where you can go get clean needles and, like, you can do, like, the drugs there.
Safe sites.
Well, I just don't understand, like, why those people aren't arrested, like, when they go to those clinics, you know what I mean? Because if you have illegal drugs, then obviously you would be charged with something, but those people aren't.
Yeah, well, they're the end users who typically aren't the sellers, and you have to have evidence that they sell something in order for it to be, like, it's kind of complicated the way it works because you think that they would be arrested just for using it, but they're not being imprisoned because it is an addiction. That's why there's rehab, and if they're making an effort to better themselves, then there's minimal consequences.
Alright. Jump.